Welcome to the Personal Tanya, day 40. Today is the second day of Shvat, and we're covering the first part of chapter 19 in the book of Tanya. Today's topic is flow states. A flow state is that which you do, which you enjoy so much that you just lose track of time. You could do it for hours on end and not even notice the time fly by, because this is your purest core. It's who you are at your deepest essence. Wouldn't it be lovely if we knew what our flow states are? And some people do know what their flow states are, whether it's reading or teaching or speaking or volunteering. There's all sorts of different flow states. And if you knew what they are, you'd be well on the way to being able to become more happy. And today's Tanya really gives us a profound insight into our flow state from the wisdom of King Solomon in Proverbs chapter 20, where King Solomon gives us a life-changing verse where he compares our soul, our godly soul, to a candle. Now, this metaphor is a metaphor so important. It's going to accompany us through the first part of Tanya, the 53 chapters of Tanya. It's a foundational concept in Jewish spirituality. And that is that just like a candle defies logic, defies rhyme and reason, it's different to every other creation on this earth, so too is the nature of our soul. Why I say that the candle is unique is because everything in this world goes down and the candle goes up. The candle, the fire, the flame reaches upwards, and the reason for that is explained in Tanya, is that four elements in this universe is earth, air, fire, and water. Earth is the lowest. That's why when you drop earth, it goes down. Water is above the earth, and therefore the water also goes down. Air is above the water, and that's why when you let air out of a balloon or something, it just goes sideways. But the source of fire is an invisible orbit. It's a little esoteric for us to understand, but the source of fire is an invisible orbit, which is just below the orbit of the moon, which is why fire goes upwards. And Tanya explains, King Solomon explains that the reason why fire goes upwards is because the fire wants to be incorporated inside of its source, and the source of fire in the sub-orbit, where it will lose its own sense of identity, but it will be incorporated into its source. In exactly the same way, our godly soul, like a candle, yearns to move away from its own identity and be incorporated within its source. Even though the candle there will no longer be existing as an independent light, so too our soul is not interested in ego. Our godly soul is not interested in ego. Anything which involves in manifesting our ego is the opposite of the flow state of our soul. What our godly soul wants to do is to fulfill the will of God and to be incorporated within God, even though it means that it will lose its own identity. And that is the nature of our godly soul. That's the nature of the hidden love, which we're talking about, that comes naturally to every one of us because it's natural to our godly soul. Yesterday in the Tanya, we learned how our relationship with God is irrational. It's a paradox. But today we're diving a little deeper to grasp why it's irrational. The reason is because, like a flame, like the candle, the soul yearns to be free of its own ego and be incorporated in the mothership. This, by the way, is the reason why when we remember a soul, we do so with a yahrzeit candle. What's a candle got to do with a soul, if not for this particularly unique and inspiring meditation? Interestingly, someone once said that the word ego in English is an acronym for edging God out. Edging God out is ego, because where there is ego, there is no God. Where there is God, there is no ego. And what this really does for us is that it reframes the battlefield between the godly soul and the animal soul within us. It's no longer a war between good and bad. We can now understand that since the desire of the godly soul is to be selfless and altruistic, and the desire of the animal soul, as we learned in chapter 6, is to be selfish, ego. This is really the battle between selfish and selfless, not good and bad. Or to put it in Freudian terms, it's the battle between the id and the yid, the Jew within us. Now, admittedly, this is irrational. The nature of the candle makes no sense. Why would the candle want to be invisible? Why would it want to be incorporated in and the source of fire where it no longer has any identity of its own, it's irrational. And that anything which is irrational is what we call nature. Why do birds eat worms? Why does water flow down? Why does hot air rise? We don't know. We just call it nature. And so too, the nature of fire is to rise. And the nature of the soul is to be incorporated within God as it loses its own unique identity. The nature of the soul, the flow state of your soul, is to be humble, to be transparent, and not to manifest its ego. Anything which expresses your ego is going to be the opposite of a flow state. Anything which doesn't express your ego might just be the direction of your flow state. The nature of the soul is rooted not in the wisdom of the godly soul, because remember, this defies logic. It's rooted in the level of chachma, which we call the idea or the inspiration of the godly soul, the level of chachma which contains within it God's infinite light. But if this love is so powerful that defies rhyme and reason, then why is it hidden? That is the topic of tomorrow's Tanya. But for today, that's a wrap. Let's try to apply